You're welcome to the Niger Law Coach. Today we'll be dealing with the Classical School of Criminology. As we very well know, there are three schools of criminology: the Classical School, the Neoclassical School, and the Positivist School of Criminology. Under each school, you will now have different theories. Like in the Positivist School, you will have the biological school, the physiological school, the psychological theories. Basically, rather, you'll have the biological theory, the physiological theory, the psychological theory, the environmental theory, or social cultural theories. But for today, we're going to start with the Classical School of Criminology. Now, the Classical School of Criminology was developed by two philosophers or two thinkers, Cesare Beccaria, an Italian, and Jeremy Bentham, an Englishman, in the 18th century. The 18th century Europe was a situation where there was a harsh climate of crime and punishment, and as such the thinkers were motivated by this harsh climate to be interested in reforming the legal system to protect the accused persons against harsh and arbitrary punishments by the states. Now, Mannheim actually, in his book Pioneers in Criminology, describes the period as, you will see it here on the page: the existent criminal law of 18th century Europe was in a general repressive, it was uncertain and barbaric. Its administration permitted and encouraged incredibly arbitrary and abusive practices. The agents of the criminal law, prosecutors and judges, were allowed tremendous latitude in dealing with persons accused and committed of crime, and corruption was rampant throughout continental Europe. In other words, the law at that point, the criminal law at that point, was not good. It was repressive, uncertain and barbaric. Also, its administration was also not very good because it permitted incredibly arbitrary and abusive practices, because the judges, the criminal law, the agents of criminal law, who are the prosecutors and the judges, were given great latitude. Again, you will find out that in that period there were secret trials. There was a lot of secret trials, there was torture, and there were a lot of capital punishment for almost every offense. Now, what were the theories on which the Classical School was based? There were two main theories: the social contract theory and the free will or rational theory. Let's talk about the social contract theory. Beccaria actually based his ideas on a variation of the social contract theory. You know that the other social contract theories like Locke, John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and Thomas Hobbes, who talked about the pactum unionis and pactum substitutionis. But according to Beccaria, laws are the condition under which men who are naturally independent united themselves in society. Men give up part of their liberties so as to enjoy the rest of their liberty in peace and security. The sovereignty of a nation consisted of the sum of all the portions of the liberty of the individual sacrificed to the common good, and this sovereignty was placed in the hands of the sovereign or government to be lawfully administered by it. In other words, you find out that for societies to come together, individuals have to give up a portion of their liberty, because when they are alone, that liberty is not secure, so they give up part of their liberty to come into a society where their liberty will be protected. And then the portion of their liberty that they give up and place in the hand of the sovereign is what is called the sovereignty of the people. Now, this deposit of sovereignty must also be defended from being usurped by the individuals who comprise a community, who, if they were left to themselves, would take back their sacrificed portion of liberty and also encroach on that of the others. Punishments are therefore the motives devised by the law to prevent the despotism of individuals from plunging society into chaos. What does this mean? It means that when these people give up their liberties and form a sovereignty, if you don't protect this sovereignty that has been given up that has been formed by the individuals, each individual will take back his own portion of the liberty that he has given up, and will also encroach on the liberty of other people. And so the law has to be used to protect the social contract. This sovereignty that is formed is part of the social contract, and this is what is being protected. And punishments are therefore the motives that are devised by the law to prevent the individual from encroaching on the sovereignty, on the liberty of other people. Now, under the social contract theory, what you need to know is that the individual can only be bound by his own consent. And how is he bound? By his only giving up a portion of his liberty to become a member of society. In other words, if a person does not give up his liberty, he cannot be a member of society. He cannot bind him. And so, because under the social contract theory, the individual sacrifices his liberty for the benefit of the social contract, the community will then become responsible for him to protect him. and laws are made to protect the social contract and avoid an individual usurping the social contract. Now, Beccaria insists that part of social contract that individuals should not commit crimes, because committing crime is against the norm of the social contract. But where the individual breaches the norm of the social contract by committing crime, he should be punished, which will deter him from committing crime, and will also generally deter other individuals with who have the intention of committing crime. Any punishment inflicted on any individual must be proportionate to the nature of his crime. The punishment is not to harm the individual or kill him, but to deter him. The underlying idea of Beccaria is therefore, let the punishment fit the crime, and this should guide legal reform. Now let's look at the free will theory. The free will is defined by the Lexicon Webster Dictionary as a power to direct one's action without physical or divine forces. It's the belief that humans are rational and take purposive action to act or not to act. It presupposes that human beings can understand the difference between right and wrong and choose to commit crimes or obey the law because they want to maximize pleasure or minimize pain. Now, in other words, it says that the free will theory believes that human beings are rational. They decide what they want to do after weighing things properly, weighing between the right and the wrong, and their basic idea is to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. It believes that the main instrument for control of human behavior is fear of pain, and as such, punishment creates fear of pain and helps to control human behavior. However, according to Beccaria, punishment should be proportional to the nature of the crime and should inflict more pain than the pleasure derived from committing the crime. But however, where the legal system is vague, it will be difficult to determine such a punishment that will inflict more pain than the pleasure derived from committing the crime, and as such, to avoid arbitrary and impulsive infliction of pain, it is necessary that penal laws are clearly written and the nature of sanctions specifically prescribed therein. In other words, in order to avoid the states inflicting arbitrary punishment on people, the punishment should be clearly written, the penal laws are to be written, and the nature of the sanctions should be prescribed in the penal law. And then it should be the duty of judges to interpret the law and not the states to determine who violated the law and what punishment to mete out. This is the rule of law, where judges interpret the laws and determine who violated the law. Again, under the free will theory, the purpose of the criminal justice system and punishment is to prevent crime by deterring persons and not vengeance. In other words, you don't use the criminal law as a way of exacting vengeance on offenders, but rather a way to deter people from committing crime. And therefore, excessive severe punishments are not necessarily deterrent, but rather appropriate, prompt and inevitable punishments are deterrent, and as such the punishment should fit the crime. The appropriate punishment should just be severe enough to overcome the gain from the crime. According to Beccaria, in order for punishment not to be in every instance an act of violence of one or many against a private citizen, it must be necessarily public, prompt or immediate, the least possible in given circumstances, proportionate to the crime, and dictated or determined by the laws. Beccaria was against the capital punishment, which he felt was a waste of Beccaria was against the capital punishment because he felt this was a waste of resources and an act of brutality and violence. He believed the death penalty was against the social contract and disagreeable to the sentiments of people. Why did he say it was disagreeable to the sentiments of the people? Because of the way you look at executors. People who hang criminals in those days were looked at. Society did not regard them as good people. The terms of the social contract did not vest in the government the right of life and death to justify capital punishment in the criminal justice system. Beccaria also advanced the principle of utilitarianism, which was later popularized by Jeremy Bentham. The greatest good for the greatest number, that's utilitarianism. As such, the law should provide the greatest happiness for the greatest number. And his seminal treatise on criminology was Essays on Crime and Punishment in 1764. According to Bentham, in his Principles of Morals and Legislation, he also forwarded the principle of utilitarianism, that the aim of a legislator should be to achieve the greatest happiness for the greatest number. Based on his hedonistic calculus, he believed that punishment should just be in excess of the pleasures. What was it? That people rationally calculate the pleasure to be gained from hedonistic calculus. People generally calculated what pleasures they could get from a crime, and then the pain that could, and then decided on based on that whether to go ahead with the crime. He believed punishment should just be in excess of the pleasures derived from an act. And then since law exists to provide happiness for all and punishment creates unhappiness, punishments can only be justified if it prevents greater evils than it produces. For Bentham, the criminal law and punishment should not be used as a weapon of vengeance and should not be used to regulate morality. Criminal punishment should be used only against conduct which is harmful to society. Acts which produce no evil but which prejudice, mistake, or destructive influence have caused to be regarded as offences should not be punished by penal sanctions. Such of these offences include offences that originate from the sexual appetite, where there is no violence, fraud, no interference with the rights of others, and also offences against the self. The main criticism of the classical school was that its main what is the criticism of the classical school? The main criticism of the classical school was that its main focus was trying to devise universal penal measures while ignoring the determinants of human action like environment, psychology, physiology, etc. Human nature and motivation seems to have been turned upside down by the classical school. Why is this? Because people do not methodically add and subtract pain and pleasure differentials to determine their conduct. Other factors like the environment, like psychology, like physiology also at work in determining human conduct. Now, what other criticism do you have? It did not recognize the distinction between the first offender and the recidivist or hardened criminal, the incidental and the habitual. It did not recognize that there are differences between the first offender and the hardened criminal, and the accidental criminal and the habitual criminal, and it was merely concerned with injury inflicted by the criminal and not the state of mind of the criminal. In conclusion, the classical school was responsible for sparking up great legal reform in many countries and has been held to be the basis on which the American legal system was based, as well as the French legal system. Beccaria is acknowledged as a great reformer who brought about great reforms in penal law. But remember that the ideas of the classical school was a reaction to prevailing climates of harsh criminal law and punishment in the 18th century. But it did not necessarily study criminals, but rather interested in lawmaking and legal processing. I think you must have learned a lot from this, and I hope that you're able to apply this to your law studies. Thanks.